You know Mark Leruste?
I do. He's been on our show
Yeah.
twice. We've collaborated
Yeah.
on a number of projects. Yeah.
That would be my answer.
Mark Leruste. Okay.
Mark Leruste. I always credit him. I tell him he's like my origin story when it comes to business. And at the time when we connected, I had just gotten my master's degree. I was working as a mental performance coach because my degree is in sports psychology, athletic counseling. I could have stayed longer and been like a licensed therapist, but I didn't really want to go down the clinical route. I always wanted to start a business, so I started a business. I quickly learned it's really hard to start a business. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what an invoice was when I started. I mean, I literally knew nothing. So I was working. I got some contract work. And that's when I even got to coach brain surgeons and sales directors, like any high pressure, high performance role. And half of my colleagues were Olymp. Super cool. Still struggled. Still really hard. That's one of those things where like social media makes it look sexy, but it's not always so sexy when you look behind the curtain. I saw this TED Talk at the time called What They Don't Tell You About Entrepreneurship, which I see you nodding.
Great talk, yeah.
And it resonated so much so, struck a chord with me that I reached out to him. And this is where I didn't know it at the time, but authentic outreach was at play. I did a lot of research. His message, his mission really resonated with me. I did a personalized introduction. I followed up. I did all of the steps. Even his first response was actually back to my cold email, was actually correcting me on how I could have done better. And so cheeky me, I took his advice and fed it back through another email to him. And that's when we got on a call. And we built more rapport, and then I offered an appetizer, and I offered to help him with some of what he was working on. And long story short, he became my first operations consulting client, which I didn't know what that was at the time, but he told me I was good at it. And really, I was doing all the behind the scenes, building tech stacks and website wireframing, email marketing, newsletters, automations, system, like just all that stuff that happens behind closed doors for a solopreneur, speaker, author, coach, consultant. I was doing all of that. And I did a good enough job that he, told someone else, and they told someone else, and he was based in London. And so that's how even my business partner today, Ped,
who was on our podcast, by the way,
who was also, yep, small world. But I was introduced to him. He was a former client of mine before we years later became business partners. And,
Okay, so Ped was a client of yours.
Ped was one of my operations consulting clients. And he was introduced to me, I think, actually through a mutual connection between him and Mark, even though him and Mark also knew each other. And we just, we've stayed in touch. And this is what I mean about the authenticity is I reached out to him because it actually resonated. I actually cared about the industry he's in. And this makes sense that you know all these people because I'm interested in this. 10 years later, I'm interested in this space. And so much so that like I actually went to Mark's wedding in France this past summer. So I'm not saying that you can build those kinds of relationships with every single client or prospect or person you talk to. But when you bring your full self and you focus in on a specific niche, and that's why that matters. You just only have so much time and energy. Then your hit rate is going to be much higher. And it's strategic, but being strategic is not the opposite of being authentic. Yeah, I think the two can absolutely coexist, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then you can evolve over time, as I have. I'm no longer doing operations consulting. I've woven that into the systems and frameworks that we teach. Mark was so well connected that sometimes the people you connect to, that's why I say you never know where it can lead. It doesn't have to just be a quick turnaround transaction. Sometimes it's really is the relationship is the most important part.